Alright, X-Wing players. I kind of feel like I've done a little bit of a disservice because I haven't really put a lot of time into really talking about X-Wing, really putting some effort into X-Wing. And I'm looking at getting some battle reports done for X-Wing and 40K. But for some reason, everything I need for my camera keeps disappearing. But that's something I'm working on. But X-Wing. Let's talk about the thought process. Let's talk about strategy. What do you anticipate you'll be going up against with your list? Or how do you build your lists? Do you try and build a list catering to the opposite factions, or do you try and build your list that deals with your own? So for example, let's say we're playing Rebels. Do you try and make a list that will deal with other Rebels? Or do you try and make a list that deals more against the Empire and the Scum? Or is it possible to make a list that can deal with both? Because each faction has their own little niches, their own little quirks, which isn't a bad thing. The question is, can you utilize them to your advantage in a game where maybe your opponent is running either the exact same list or something close to that list? Now, as I said before, with X-Wing, it really comes down to two major factors of how well you fly your ships and how well you roll the dice. And those are just factors you can control. We're not looking at, or at least we're not really diving into the other variables of where your opponent's ships are, where your ships are, as far as in relation to each other, whether or not they're asteroids. Maybe you picked up a critical damage that has some lingering effects, like affecting your pilot, affecting your ship. Maybe you have certain loadouts on your ships, upgrades that only are effective at certain ranges. So how do you build your list? And what is your list really trying to accomplish? And that's one question that I often pose to people, to new players who are getting into 40K. What kind of an army do you want to play? What kind of play style do you have? And really, you can really get those kind of answers, because if they've played other games, or if they play like PC games or console games, and you just kind of ask them some questions, what do you play style, what do you like to play, you kind of can get an idea of, okay, this is your play style. So, for example, if your play style is, I want to stay back and do damage from afar, in 40K, I'm thinking, okay, you want to play Space Marines, or you want to play Tau, maybe Eldar. In X-Wing, maybe it's a range card that you stay back at range 3, maybe at the furthest you can in range 2, so your opponent doesn't get that extra defense dice. But what do you do, or how do you counter something that you don't really know what to do against? They're using the same shit, but they're doing something that's off the wall a little bit. And with new players, while I don't classify myself as new, but I'm still growing in the X-Wing hobby. And one thing I always tell new players is, don't worry about what your opponent is playing. Focus more on ships that you want to play, or a list that you want to try. And I kind of, again, go back to a piece of advice I do for 40K, is you take a point. So in this case, 100 points, standard battle for X-Wing. Take 100 points. You build your list. So say you want to do... for example, we'll do 3 X-Wings and a Y-Wing. You want to play around, maybe try a couple different upgrades here and there. Run that list 3, 4, 5 times. Take note of what you're going up against. Take note how successful you were. Maybe take some notes about, okay, maybe this didn't work out very well. I got demolished this quickly. What am I doing wrong? And make tweaks to them. And maybe sometimes it may just be better to, okay, this list isn't working out. Let's scrap it. Let's just try something new. Or maybe, hey, I've tried this list 3, 4, 5 times. It's okay, but it's still too inconsistent. Maybe let's just build a whole new list with all new ships. Run that 3, 4, 5, 6 times. And kind of see what the results are. And maybe take a look at the comparison between the two lists. Maybe take elements from each and put them together in a third list. And so on and so forth, until you get to a list that you feel comfortable with, that you like how it's set up, and that you can be competitive with. And X-Wing is really a fun game, but it can be competitive. If nothing, because really, unlike 40K, where you can get draws, unless you and your opponent agree in X-Wing, it's a clear cut. There's a winner and there's a loser. So tell me, how do you go about building your lists? How do you try and cater your lists? What advice would you give a new person who is just getting into X-Wing? Maybe they've got the core ships, maybe they got about 3, 4, 5 different expansions, maybe they got a couple of the big expansion sets. What would you do to give them advice?